I learned to map a room on the first day, where the windows threw the best light, which plants were fake, who brought lunch every Wednesday. Small offices are tiny ecosystems. Everyone knows everyone's rhythms, their coffee orders, the drawer where the emergency chocolate lives. You learn the social currents without meaning to. You also learn where not to sit. They sat me beside Marco. He was the trainer the company assigned me for the 2-week onboarding. Marco had been here longer than most. He carried himself like someone who'd been told to grow up fast. He wore the same 2 shirts, one faded navy, one faded gray, and belt loops that testified to a life that did not include shopping for new clothes. On paper, he was the steady, patient type. 3 years at the firm, a list of certifications, a name that managers pronounced with a little relief when they needed a steady hand. In person, he was all jaw and quiet habits, the kind of person who kept to a tidy ritual. Morning checklist, 2 cups of terrible office coffee, a slow, precise way of explaining the CRM. The first time I noticed it, I tried to pretend it was nothing. A new place makes you polite. You give people the benefit of the doubt. But I remember the exact tilt of the fluorescent light, the way the hum of the AC folded into the next elevator bell, and the slow, unmistakable wash of him as he leaned close to show me where to click. It wasn't a faint human smell. It was an element that crowded the senses. Think of a damp coat left in a trunk for too long, an alarm that keeps going off because someone forgot to change the batteries. And there was his breath when he read over my shoulder, acrid, sour, enough to make a metallic tang rise in my throat. I swallowed. I smiled. I kept my body angled away. 2 days and my head throbbed. On the 3rd day, I brought mints, little lifesavers I passed around like sacramental wafers, and Marco took one politely, then put it on the desk and forgot about it. I thought, maybe bad night, maybe garlic. By the end of the week, my nose was a battleground. I got headaches that felt like punched-in sockets. There were moments, standing near the printer, watching his back, tracing the route of his day, where the room itself seemed to tilt. I began to choose my spots in subtle ways, farthest from him during stand-up, near the window where the wind might save me. You learn quickly which problems you can fix yourself and which require the grown-up route of escalation. Stains on the carpet? You vacuum. An inbox nightmare? You make rules. Odor that pierces and lingers? That needed more than a clever strategy. But I also knew I was new. I did not want to be the ingrate who picked fights in week 2. I did not want to be a difficult hire. I told myself to breathe through it, to be patient. The patience lasted until the client demo. It was a Tuesday. The meeting was in the glass room with the big TV, the one where the ceiling lights threw a halo and the clients watched every slide like passengers watching the shoreline. Marco was supposed to lead the brief. He'd practiced the script with me twice. I had prepped the deck, settled the sequence, and rehearsed my lines until they felt second nature. There were 3 clients and the head of product. I could feel the room flexing with importance. Halfway through the demo, in the silky part where we show metrics and how well our campaign placements had performed, my head started to swim. First came the prickly ears, then the nodding that feels like a comedian's applause, but comes from a different place. Somebody coughed politely. Someone adjusted a notebook. Marco's voice went on and on with a steady technician's rhythm, and I caught myself watching his mouth rather than the screen. A child's memory of sour candy flashed. I tasted metal. My hands went cold. I leaned forward to the laptop as if to cue the next slide. The motion felt like a plunge. Suddenly, my vision narrowed to a pinprick. I felt dizzy enough that the coffee cup in front of me looked like a sundial. The woman from client services asked a pointed question about reach. My answer swam. I muttered something, an offering of words, and then the world tilted again. I could see the edge of the conference table like the rail of a ship, and someone's face above me blurred into watercolor. I managed to say, "I," and then steadied. After the meeting, I left with a pounding temple and a story that had gone wrong. Everyone was kind in the way people are when no one knows what to do. A blanket offered here, a bottle of water there. But on the elevator ride down, alone with the hum of the building, I felt small and furious. Furious at my own body for feeling weak. Furious at the situation for making space where I could not breathe. That night, I lay awake and made a list. Option 1. Confront Marco directly, in private. With kindness, ask if he knew. Option 2. Talk to HR, expose the problem, and let them handle it. Option 3. Quietly look for another seat, shuffle operations until I no longer sat beside him. Moral hedging occupied my mind. I could see the switchbacks of each decision like choices in a game. Each one carried risk, hurting someone who might not deserve it, making a new hire look fragile, or doing nothing. The next morning, I tried the gentle approach. Marco and I had a moment by the whiteboard between training modules. The museum of my diplomacy. A soft tone, a comment about office routines, a question like a pebble dropped in water. "Hey Marco," I said, "I wanted to ask, do you have any tips for dealing with long days? I noticed you had a different routine." He blinked and smiled politely, but the smile had a weary pull. "Long days get you," he said. "I walk to the river on Saturdays if I can." He stooped to pick up a marker, and the smell came like a low tide. The words clogged in my mouth like bad peanut butter. I swallowed. "Is everything okay?" I tried again, softer. He looked at me, then like I had asked him the weather. There was a small pause, a tightening around his mouth. "I'm fine," he said. "Don't worry." The answer was not helpful, and, crucially, not true. I left feeling the weight of it. When curiosity crosses a threshold, it becomes something else. Concern, pity, obligation. I had the latter too now, but I also had boundaries. I could not be sick every day in the course of learning my job. I chose HR. Omar, the HR lead, had a calmness that could be measured in breaths per minute. He listened without flinching. I described the physical symptoms: lightheadedness, headaches, nausea during close proximity. I tried, in a way that felt careful, to be non-judgmental. "I don't think he's malicious," I said. "I think he might be struggling, but I'm worried for my health." Omar nodded. There was the smallest click, the sound of an internal process engaging. "Thank you for flagging this," he said. "We'll handle it discreetly." He asked the right kinds of questions. How long, whether others had mentioned it. Would I be comfortable with a private mediated conversation? Questions that smelled of procedure and care. I left the meeting lighter, but still anxious. I had given the problem to a trained adult. The ball was in someone else's court. For 2 days, nothing seemed to change. I watched menial rituals continue around me. The printer spat. The kettle boiled. People argued over lunch choices. Then the email arrived. An announcement that the company would be rolling out a new health and hygiene kit as part of a broader wellness initiative. A cosmetic wording for a practical intervention. Free toothbrushes, travel-sized toothpaste, deodorant, and vouchers for dental checkups. The announcement was upbeat and impersonal, the kind of corporate language that tries to hug grief and policy at once. But under its sad intention, Omar had not promised a thunderclap. He promised process. The kit landed on my desk the next morning in a soft gray box with a ribbon. That was the first act of change. But HR did not stop there. They arranged a private meeting with Marco, one that respected privacy and offered support rather than shame. I did not attend. The company asked me if I wanted to be in the room. I thanked them and declined. It felt like a quiet mercy to let the professionals do their job. Word later leaked, the kind of human detail that travels through corridors, that Marco had been carrying a backstory heavy enough to sag a shoulder. His mother had early-stage dementia. His shifts at a hospice facility kept him awake half the night, and there were bills unpaid and laundry that gathered like a second life. He had been too embarrassed to say anything. Washing machines and toothpaste cost money and time. A dental infection, left untreated, can make breath horrific. A week of sleepless caregiving can make a person's routines collapse. None of this excused the smell, but it made the situation another shape altogether. Not malicious, not lazy, but a small human falling through the cracks. HR offered him assistance. Not a sermon, but a package. A voucher for a local clinic, a discreet laundry service subscription for a month, access to the employee assistance program, and a temporary reassigning of his training responsibilities while he got help. They also asked if he'd accept a staggered schedule so he could handle caregiving without coming into the office exhausted and unable to care for himself. He accepted with trembling relief, the kind of relief that sounds like someone taking a long overdue exhale. There are no neat scenes in real life, only sequences. People react to kindness and process in ways that surprise us. For Marco, the support mattered. Months later, quietly, without a staff email and without fanfare, he began to change. The smell eased. He started showing up in shirts that had been washed recently. There were small rituals. A dentist appointment scheduled on a Wednesday morning, and a soft-faced grin when the receptionist handed back his clean dental booklet. He kept the job. He smiled more. He even, once, brought in a humble tin of cookies and said, "For everyone," and I watched a few people who'd been wary now accept them without the twitch that had once accompanied his presence. But not every consequence was radioactive with joy. There was sadness threaded through the whole episode, a low, clarifying ache. I had learned the power of speaking up and the power of process. I had also learned the limits of private charity. That kindness can move mountains, but it is not always enough to fix the systemic pressures that cause someone to arrive at work half-drowned. Marco's life was complicated. The company's help was a bridge, not a cure. For him, there were still nights of exhaustion. And for the rest of us, there were lingering moments when someone would glance toward his desk with a memory of that first week. Human impressions are sticky. The learning, though, landed where learning generally does, in practice. We instituted better support for caregivers and clarified a pathway for health-related assistance in onboarding packets. Omar led workshops, not lecture halls, but small circles where people could speak about stress, money, and care responsibilities. We began offering stipends for laundry or transport for short-term crises. It was not revolutionary. It was practical. It was, for an office like ours, radical enough. I also learned to name my own edge. I learned that being empathetic is not the same as being complicit with harm to oneself. I learned how to ask for help without making a person feel like a monster. I learned how to escalate in a way that asks for dignity as much as remediation. Most of all, I learned that workplaces are not just systems of outputs and KPIs. They are, stubbornly, made of people. Months later, in the summer that felt too hot for anything but careful movements, Marco and I found ourselves standing by the window shortage of time ritual 5 minutes before the meeting to breathe. He looked less curled under life and more like someone upright. He held a small rectangular card and slid it across the sill to me like a clumsy, earnest gift. "Thanks for speaking up," he said, voice soft, embarrassed in the most human way. I was afraid I'd lose this job. "I'm trying." I accepted the card, and it was not a postcard. It was a receipt from a dentist, dated the prior week. The tooth that had rotted now had a filling. The breath of that day was clean. I touched the paper with a kind of reverence, like someone who has been given back a small, sacred piece of a person. That's not a cinematic ending. It is quieter, and perhaps truer. Things improved because someone with the authority to act stepped in, because a system had a process that could hold apology and assistance together, and because a new hire learned how to balance compassion with self-care. I did not need to be the hero. I needed to be honest. The office, an ecosystem of small mercies and small tests, learned something about dignity. There are still days when bodies drag and people struggle. There are still small cruelties and small kindnesses. But I no longer map the room only to avoid discomfort. I map it to find where I can make it better. The cactus in my little cluster thrives on less water than I thought it needed. So did we, in that small fluorescent lit corner of our building. Under pressure, with care, we learned to live.